All children up to 6th grade are welcome to go to Children's Church. Brother Jeremiah is back there greeting them already. So Genesis chapter 40 for the rest of us. Genesis chapter number 40. Going through the life of Joseph, it's a crazy life. And when you think about the events that take place, I remember talking to a group of teenagers, preaching to a group of teenagers at a teen revival. And I was preaching on the life of Joseph, not with this kind of detail or kind of a lot of very generic information, to be honest with you. It was actually one message on the life of Joseph. And anyways, as I was going through his life, one of the teenagers said, "No way!" I mean, just like truly didn't believe these kind of things happen. I said, "Yes, this all happened in one guy's life." And another teen said, "That guy was messed up." And so, yeah, he had problems as far as the way he was raised and the way that things that happened in his life. And then to come out to know where he comes out, and I appreciate the song Mrs. Jewell sang. Just what a wonderful song. Thankful for that. But that's what Joseph was doing, right? I mean, when you think about what's going on in Joseph's life, at the end of it, I shall come forth as gold. That's the whole concept of that. God is doing the work, and he's preparing them for what would take place. Now, spoiler alert on this, Joseph will eventually rise up to be in charge of everything. And so he will be second only to Pharaoh. In the book of Psalms, it describes, in fact, it gives testimony. In Psalm 105, verse 17 through 22, gives record in regards to what happened with the life of Joseph and knowing and understanding a little bit about why he went through what he went through. And anyways, in this one, in Genesis chapter number 40, we're going to go through another stage. Joseph had dreams. Now, sometimes we have weird dreams. Anybody get weird dreams? I get weird dreams. I had a weird dream last night, and I'll tell you about it later. I don't disclose my dreams usually, and perhaps I'll ask the matter of it, and you guys can interpret it for me. But anyways, that's what they do in the Bible, right? But anyways, going through, we're going to see some of these things when it comes to dreams. Dreams are interesting in the Bible. That God's work of revelation in regards to the future has been completely penned down as much as he wants us to have it in the Bible. And so his work of revelation in regards to truth and his work is not done through dreams any longer. But no doubt that God has used it. And God can, of course, use anything. But he's used it. I mean, he's used animals. All right. In fact, this passage we read in the book of Numbers, there was stuff going on back there where animals are talking. That's not a normal thing, but it's not that God can do it. It's almost a proof he can. And so, anyways, let's look at Genesis chapter 40. It's not an incredibly long passage of Scripture. I think 23 verses, I believe. If I could turn the page there. All right. 23 verses. So it's not very long, but most of it is going to have to do with dreams. 15 of the 23 verses have to do with dreams. And anyways, what's going to happen with it? But look at verse number 1. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Now remember, Joseph is where at this point? Where's he at? He's in prison. Last week was a message specifically about prison. And I'm sorry, not about going there, but of course some lessons that we learned from prison. This morning, the message, I had to pull up what my title was, The Plain Will of God. The Plain Will of God. We're going to address the concept of Joseph and disappointments that occur, but the plain will of God. Now, we know he's in prison. We saw this at the end of chapter number 40. He's there. He's in charge of a lot of people there, but no question he's in prison. And anyway, so he's going to have a special job to do now. He's going to start taking care of two prisoners in particular. And according to verse number 1, it's the baker and the butler. Now, I do wonder, what in the world did the baker and butler do? Now, based on the dreams, I have a guess. Now, this is purely a guess. I'll ask when I get to heaven, or I'll find out Joseph, like, what did they do? Sometimes we want to know that, right? Well, my guess is this, that something to do with the bread the butler made wasn't good, and the baker made, and the butler that served it should have known better, and so they were thrown into jail. That's my guess. That's just a complete guess. And it's Pharaoh, or the king of Egypt. So anyways, that's the best I can do. Maybe too much fennel. That's my guess. They use a lot of that there, so kind of a strong taste. Not good for the bread. That's my biggest guess. It's going to be fennel. Fennel is my guess. All right, so anyways, verse number 2. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. So Joseph served them, and they continued a season in ward. So when you look at the life of Joseph, Joseph has had an interesting past. He was raised in a place that wasn't necessarily great. Not that he didn't have instruction as far as what God was giving him in scriptural things, but because there was a lot of bad things that went around there. His brothers were incredibly wicked people. We saw that back in chapter number 38 with Judah. And we see others. I mean, his brothers literally sell him into slavery, and they pretend he died, and they deceived his father for years and would have gone to the grave with that information had it not been found out by them showing up before Joseph. And so anyways, that's the background. His father had not necessarily been very good. His mom had been idolatrous. So there was a pretty rough background as far as what was going on there. He gets sold into slavery. He's sold into slavery, gets to go into Potiphar's house, which he gets some recognition there as being in charge. But anyways, we saw with 2 weeks ago when it came down to Potiphar's wife that was trying to seduce Joseph and being unseducible because he was faithful, because he trusted the Lord, and he did what God wanted him to do. He goes to jail. We can say this about Joseph. A couple of things we learned by chapter number 39, chapter 40 is this, that Joseph was unjustly framed. He's unjustly framed. Now, in this place where he was there's no due process. He didn't go to court. He didn't go somewhere and they try to figure out where what's to be done with him and how responsible he was. He was just thrown into jail because this is what happened. He was put in fetters at first, and what we find out is in regards to the work that's there, he's there in jail. He has a job to do with the people that are there in prison. But ultimately, while chapter number 39 may seem to give the reading that the prison guard or the captain of the guard really likes Joseph, the concept here is that he's just given a job to do. He's responsible. He's faithful. The Lord is with him. He's prospering, which means the prison probably had some kind of work that they were doing as prisoners. But regardless, in that, he's still a prisoner. And he just noticed that Joseph's doing well. But don't take for granted the fact that this is still not his friend. All right, so the captain of the guard isn't like buddy-buddy with Joseph. He's just trying to get a job done. He takes advantage of this prisoner to put him in charge, to get stuff done, and the prison is prospering. It's doing well. Things are going well. In fact, there's probably less problems. I'd imagine that captain of the guard is probably getting a few recognition awards because in his ward, things are going great. In this captain of the guard's ward, things are going really well. They're making money. They're getting progress done. They're accomplishing more things, less fighting going on. Why? Because Joseph is in charge underneath as captain of the guard. And so anyways, things are going well. So finally, a couple high-profile guys go to prison. And when it comes to these high-profile guys, you have the butler, and it's the chief of the butler. Remember that the butler is taking care of the king. He's there to attend to the king. Whatever the king wants, he's there, and he feeds them the food. He makes sure that things are safe and healthy and tasty and set up properly, and people are welcomed the way they're supposed to be. And he is the chief of the butlers. And so it would seem that a butler did something bad, but this butler was in charge of them. And so we understand how leadership works. It's all your fault is the idea. And so this leader gets put in there as a butler. Well, a baker did something bad, so the chief of the bakers gets this put in. Now, another possible idea is that based on the fact there was lots of bakers, it's possible that some events went badly because the chief of the bakers, the guy that's in charge, gets put in prison. And anyways, they're put in here, and while they're put in here, you would think with what's going to happen next, they're going to have some dreams, and Joseph is going to tell them what God means in telling them these things, what these dreams mean. And you would think they'd be his friends, but what we're going to find out about Joseph is that he's in fact friendless in this, and they're going to forget about him. The butler and baker were there, and Joseph is serving there. And even though in this lonely place he's got some people to talk to, ultimately he's still not friends with them. So he's in this place in fetters and friendless because he is in prison. Now we have to remember, Joseph has been unjustly framed. My question to you is, what would your life be like if you got unjustly framed and get sent to prison now with a life sentence? Now, could it be worse? Yeah, I'm sure it could be. But the reality is that Joseph is going through a lot, and he's been through a lot. I mean, he was unjustly sold into slavery, wasn't he? He was unjustly unliked by his brother simply because he had dreams and he said what the dreams were. And now he's unjustly framed and put into prison. Our prison system is interesting because when you talk to prisoners, oftentimes the story is that they're guiltless, that they shouldn't be there. I'm sure you've heard those stories like, well, I shouldn't be here. Not that I've not done anything wrong, but I didn't commit this crime to that extent. I remember I got in trouble one time for doing something, and anyways, the accusation was so specific that my plea was, I am innocent because I did not do this exact thing. And so I was let go of doing something because my action was slightly different. And so I was innocent because it's slightly different. By the way, in our prison system and our judicial system is kind of awkward in our country. One thing to think about, that as far as the high rates of people that are in prison, this is random, all right? This is a random insertion of facts here, is that only 2% of criminal charges are ever brought to trial. Do you realize that? 2%. And so 97% of people that are incarcerated are there because of plea deals, plea arrangements. 97%. I heard that. I'm like, no, there's no way. So I looked it up. And it sure enough is. And what they're saying there is basically you get charged with something, you will take a plea agreement so that way you don't face what they're threatening you with in trial. Although trial has a higher percentage of people being let go as far as innocence. And so a plea agreement, so they're also saying a huge number of people that take plea agreements haven't even committed the full trespass of what they're being charged with. Those things are being given against them, so that way they'll take a lower plea agreement. And so, anyways, it's crazy. I'm not for it, just telling you. The concept here is when it comes to what's taking place with Joseph, though, is that Joseph is in a bad place in life, and ultimately he could easily blame anybody for what's going on. So the next point, which kind of leads into this, and just some logical thinking here, is having to do with his future. It's an uncertain future. He's been unjustly framed, and he has an uncertain future. Dreams have been interesting because the dreams that he had several chapters back in chapter number 37, was that he would be one day ruling, right? He has one dream where the sheaves are out, putting sheaves up, and I've been seeing that around in different places where people are cutting hay and stuff like that, making their hay bales and rolls and all that. But anyway, they have their sheaves, they're gathering sheaves, and suddenly the 12 sheaves around him all bow down to his sheaf, which is in the middle. And so he's obviously pointing out the fact that they are going to bow. His brothers, his own brothers, many of them older, all his brothers are older, they bow to Joseph. Now, that sounds good, but what's the next dream? Next one has to do with the stars and the sun. And anyways, what happens with them is not only will his brothers, the stars, bow to him or give obeisance to him, so will his parents. And his parents are like, whoa, hang on here. This is not even going to happen. And so anyways, they don't like that dream, but the point is that he's going to have a place of promise. He's going to do something important. He's going to be in charge. But let's be honest, in chapter number 4, it doesn't seem like it's going in that direction, does it? His future is uncertain. And with those, he's had dreams that, no question, this is all going in one direction, but as he looks back on it, it doesn't seem like it's going to be possible. In the dreams that are going to be mentioned here, there's going to be specific interpretations for the dreams that are had by the baker and the butler. Look at verse number 5. Verse 5, and they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. So these guys are in prison. They're bound, they're in fetters, chains of some kind, and they have dreams. I'm guessing night 1. In verse 6, and Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them. The idea, he's serving them. He's the one taking care of them. And behold, they were sad. They're bummed out. Now, which is incredible because Joseph is taking care of these guys. All he has to do is feed them, get their stuff to them. But he's concerned about how they are. And it says that they're sad. Like, oh, they woke up grumpy. All right, so that's the concept. And by the way, they're in jail. I don't know what Joseph expected. How come you're not smiling this morning? Did you wake up on the wrong side of the bed? We woke up in jail. It's where we woke up. Well, no, but this is worse. They're sad. And they're not just upset. They're not bitter. They're sad. Verse 7, and he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him in my dream, behold, a vine was before me, so a grapevine. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. The idea is that there's this vine, and boom, suddenly there it is. So 3 vines, and suddenly, immediately, there's this bunch of grapes that show up. Very quick process. And verse number 11, Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. By the way, it doesn't use the word wine right there, but it's pointing out that this is wine. This is what he's talking about. The Pharaoh drank grape juice, that's fruit of the vine. Verse number, obviously drink a lot of stuff, but anyways, verse number, next one, verse number 13. Yet, I apologize, verse 12. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee into thy place. The idea of you're exalted in position. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. You're going to be restored. Everything's going to be great in 3 days' time. He's in prison. Yeah, right. Could this happen? Well, in verse number 14, he tells him, but think on me when it shall be well with thee. And show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For I indeed was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. I'm an innocent man. Verse 16, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream. And behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket, there was all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, the idea of bread of different kinds. So think of Panera bread on his head. Three baskets of it. The birds, I'm sorry, what did it say there? And the birds did eat them out of the basket of my head. So this sounds good. So baker says, I had a dream too, and I had 3 white baskets. Pretty and clean. Obviously, this would be good for Pharaoh. And I had all sorts of baked good. I had donuts and cruffins. Have you seen a cruffin before? It's like a muffin with a croissant-type bread, so it's flaky and then typically filled with something. It's unbelievable. I'm sure he had that on the baskets. And so anyways, it was good. And so the best that he could offer there. And so anyways, filled up with all these baked stuff, and birds are coming and eating. Doesn't that sound serene? He's feeding the birds from these baskets on his head. Surely I've got something good coming. But Joseph's like, all right, you ready? Verse number 18, and Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. All right, sounds good, kind of like the 3 vines. Verse number 19, yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head. Oh, didn't he lift up the head of the butler? He's going to. All right, lift up thy head from off thee. All right, so this is a little different. All right, so you're going to be lifted up, and your head's going to be lifted up in position. Yours is going to be lifted up off of your body. And shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. Now notice the play on words there. And by the way, this is very, very cruel and terrible as far as what's going to happen. But he had the boldness to say it. The thing about it is he had dreams. So now we've all had weird dreams. It's funny. I remember dreams from when I was a child. The first nightmare I ever remember when I was 4 years old was about giant ants that were invading our house and the jungle that surrounded us, which I didn't actually live in a jungle, but gigantic ants. I mean, these things were like 7 feet tall and massive. I'm not sure. We escaped on a river of like mud, and then I woke up. But I remember that very vividly. I don't remember all my dreams, but I had another dream this morning. And I woke up at 4:45 a.m. from this nightmare. I had gone out, and we were out. We're going to go do some soul winning downtown. That's a good dream to have, right? And I don't know where this downtown was. It kind of looked like a Mexican city with like cobblestone streets and all that. But anyways, the girls were going to meet somewhere, and we had a blue cargo van, like a Chevy Express. And anyways, so Lily needed to get to meet the girls, so they were going to go and reach some of the women over there at their present age, okay? They're going to do this. So Leo, my 3-year-old son, I'm like, all right, can you drive him down? So he gets in the driver's seat, and he drives Lily down there. This is my dream. And anyways, I see Lily across the square, and Leo turns off, and he's supposed to turn out, but he keeps turning down the road. And so we spent the next couple minutes in the dream searching after him, and I wake up at 4:45 a.m. And I didn't plan on waking up. I don't always wake up at 4:45, but that terrifying dream, I wanted to get away from that. Now, don't tell me the interpretation thereof, except I did learn something. Don't let my 3-year-old drive. And he's been asking me, Daddy, can I drive? Can I drive? I'm like, no, not yet. And so we'll give it another year or two. But anyways, with that, dreams are not necessarily as important. I don't know, if we're in Mexico, I will not let him drive. But the point on this is that they had dreams that mattered, right? They had dreams that were important, and they had dreams that were saying something. And in anyways, these dreams, he's telling them they belong to God. And even though the future seemed uncertain, he's telling them these are the dreams that belong to God. And he tells them this in light of the fact that the certainty for you guys are 3 days. You're going to have your head lifted up in prominence. You're going to have your head lifted off your body. And this is going to happen, and there's just a certainty in that. But Joseph is coming from a background that he's really dwelling on the fact that God himself had given him a future. There's something to be done. Joseph, you're going to be a ruler. But everything he's doing in that seems to be going backwards in this. Think about how this is going. In this, in Genesis 39, verse 5, and it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer. This is Potiphar, when he becomes a slave in Potiphar's house. That he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had. Joseph becomes the charged person, the person in charge of the household for Potiphar in a prominent house. Before that, he had been in charge of his brethren, the coat of many colors, going in and checking on them. Goes to Potiphar's house, yes, prominence, but as a slave now. In chapter 39, verse 22, and the keeper of the prison, once he's in prison, committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So now he's in charge. He was in charge of his brethren, and succeeding and prospering. He gets put as a slave. He's in charge as a slave, and that's going okay until he gets accused of stuff. And now he's going to be put in prison. He's in charge of prisoners, but now he's reduced to taking care of. In chapter number 40, verse number 4, he's in charge of 2 prisoners. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. So he's not just in charge of people. Now he's got a job to serve 2 prisoners. And so if you'll notice what he's in charge of, God says, and this dreams or points to the fact that Joseph is going to be a ruler one day. The Bible makes that very clear. Joseph knew what it meant. His brothers knew what it meant. His dad knew what he meant. But according to this, he's in charge, and it keeps going backwards. He's free, a slave, a prisoner, less prisoners. Over and over again, it keeps going backwards, even though we know something. God had a plan. For us, like Joseph, come on, man, you're going to be in charge of Egypt. You're going to save a bunch of people. But Joseph's in the midst of a struggle. He's in the midst of a difficulty. One of the things that gets me is battles that don't need to be fought. I love history. I love the study of history. How many of you have ever read up on the War of 1812? It's interesting. It's an American war, of course. It fought here. But what's interesting about that is that Andrew Jackson became very famous. In fact, it was because of the War of 1812 that he became the president of the United States eventually, because he fought a battle, a very famous battle. He fought the Battle of New Orleans, as we would say in the South, New Orleans. All right, so it's like saying St. Louis. I'm sorry, not so. Louisville, I apologize. Louisville. Have you ever heard that? I remember I said that one time when I lived in California, and I thought somebody was going to hit me. All right, so Louisville. All right, and anyways, there's a bunch of letters missing in that. But anyways, New Orleans, the Battle of New Orleans. I've heard about this a lot. And anyways, it was an incredible battle because really the Americans should have lost. I mean, from the naval standpoint, the Marine standpoint, they were outgunned, outmatched, but the Americans went out and won. Andrew Jackson was courageous, and they whooped up on these British people. But here's the deal. Why was it so important? The war was over. The war was over. They had literally signed a treaty saying it's done. We're no longer fighting. But Andrew Jackson hadn't heard about it. The British that were down there in New Orleans hadn't heard about it. The Americans hadn't, so what did? They fought a battle. And Andrew Jackson is this great victor in a battle that didn't matter. And so ultimately, you would think, okay, this is pretty bad. But what we understand about this is that when we think about battles that we don't have to fight, you think about what we go through. We understand there's a coming victory, but we still have battles that we have to fight. You might say, okay, well, that battle didn't matter, but here's who it mattered to. All the people that died. All the people that fought a battle. Oh, the war is over. It doesn't matter. The battle's still being fought. It didn't need to be fought, but it's still being fought. Think about our Christian life. How many struggles do you have as a Christian? Battles that you face. And we can easily say, well, Jesus won. And we believe that by faith, right? He won. When he died on the cross, it wasn't, well, because he's going to pay for a portion of it, and you're going to try really hard. No, he won. Complete victory. But here's the problem. You still face battles. We would talk about warfare. Is Christ victorious? Absolutely. There's not a thought in my mind that thinks, oh, Christ may not end up pulling it off. What if Satan has some kind of plan under his sleeve, and he's not going to just use atomic bombs. He's going to use nuclear bombs against Jesus when he arrives. So what? So what? All the power of hell itself would go against Christ. Nothing can stop Christ. It's impossible. He'll destroy by the word of his power. It's impossible to stop Jesus. But here's the deal. We still are in battles. We're there. And you might think, well, all the warriors around me are winning, but it doesn't matter because you've got a gun aimed right at you. And it may seem like the battle's okay, except for the battle that you're in may be different than the battle beside you. Think about it. For every person that survived, next to a person that was killed, they were in the same battle, but they were still experiencing individual battles that were separate, were they not? In fact, for every person that died beside them and for the people that they've killed, they've had both victories and successes individually. And when we think about battles, and we think about the things that we go through, and it may be times that it may seem like we shouldn't be having to go through it, what God is describing here in this is that Joseph was going through things. Yes, he had a plan, but the battles that were here were individual battles that he was going through. It was necessary for him. And it may seem like the future was uncertain because he's in battles right there. But we know that ultimately the victory will be won by Christ in the great plan that God has. The point on this is that Joseph was uncompromisingly faithful. There is no point in which Joseph starts changing a little bit and thinking, oh, well, wait a second. Now because circumstances are getting worse, and I seem like at this point I'm going to be in charge of the janitors that clean out the bathroom holes out of the prison by the end of this going on. But instead, he is faithful. How do we know he's faithful? Because in all these things, God is with him. And he continues to speak of what God would do. He's faithful. He's compassionate. He is serving them. He could have just done his job, but what does he do when he sees this guy sad? He talks to them. He helps them. He tells them that they tell him that there's a dream, so what does he do? He interprets the dream. He could have easily said, forget about it. Trust me, you don't want to know dreams. I've had them, and this is where I'm at because of it. It may seem like that. They seem like defeats, and it seems like trials and battles that are going to eventually tear him down, that will destroy him. But they're battles. Today, when I look at our life, and I think, well, wait a second, we need to go through trials and difficulties like Joseph. I'll be honest, in my life, we've had things happen to us, and people will talk about, like, oh, I can't believe you went through that and this and that. But the truth is, all of us have had those things, right? Those things that have happened, those bad things, perhaps in your childhood, perhaps in your adulthood. Perhaps right now you're going through it. The point is this, that it doesn't have to compare to what Joseph's trials were. You see, we don't have to look at this passage and think, okay, well, I'm just like Joseph right now. It's unfair, it's unjust, it's all those things. You don't have to relate to what Joseph is going through perfectly. Here's what you do have to relate it, is the response Joseph had. Joseph, in the midst of these battles and trials and difficulties, was faithful. And listen, faithfulness can be hard. The term faithful is interesting because it's made up of two words, right? What are the two words in faithful? English. Faith and full. All right, two words, faith and full. Isn't it something that we've started taking the word faithful just to mean something else? The word faithful just starts meaning just being there. Just like, should we be there for people? Yes. But we're talking about like existing, that we feel like we're faithful. That we did something for a long time, so we're faithful. I believe that many times what we would count faithfulness in regards to longevity, which there's no question that a faithful person does have longevity, that longevity and faithfulness are two different things. See, Joseph's in prison, he's doing that work, but he's not just doing that work, he continues to trust God. He's still full of faith. Let me ask you, are you still full of faith? Do you love God right now as much as you did a year ago? Or last week, or 10 years? How about when you first got saved? Do you still love God as much and you still trust Him in that way? Oh, well, I'm just going to keep doing it. For instance, there's things we need to do. Or we're going to say, right with God by not doing all these things. We're not going to watch that stuff or listen to those things or dress in this way or say those things. But are you full of faith in doing them? I think many times because of the tremendous comfort and luxury as Americans that we live in, we are spoiled. If we forget the fact that the trials themselves are designed to show us something about God Himself so that we could serve Him better. And what happens is we need to be able to look and be full of faith in what we're doing for God. The Bible describes it very clearly in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter number 4. That, moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. In verse 1, he tells us, let a man so account of us as of the ministers of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Here's what he's saying. You are containers and the workers of the work of the gospel. The work of gospel has happened in you, and now you've got to do something with it. And here's what he's saying. As a steward, as a manager of those blessings, you got to be faithful. You got to be full of faith. Well, I'll just keep going to church. I'll just keep going to church. Well, good. But are you full of faith and you're doing it? How do we know this about Joseph being faithful? A few things. In chapter 39, when there's temptation, Joseph, when he speaks, what he says, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? When he speaks, What's his thoughts? I can't violate God. He's got God in mind. Chapter 40, verse 8, Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Let's keep God not just in the mix, but make it about him. Chapter 41, the next chapter, which will be in next week, God willing. Verse 16, 2 years later, when Joseph is given an opportunity to interpret the dream of Pharaoh, he says, it is not in me, God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Chapter 41, verse 50. And then to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said, he hath made me forget all my toil in all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Chapter 45, verse 8, speaking to his brethren, which are somewhat reunited at this point. So now it is not you that sent me hither. In other words, not because you sold me to slavery and I'm in Egypt. It's not you guys didn't send this, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. God hath made me lord of all Egypt. Now, you'll notice this. When it comes to this, yes, he had a background where he was unjustly framed. It's true. His future, no doubt, uncertain. But you have to remember, he is uncompromisingly faithful because God maintains his authority and position. And God is going to do everything that God's going to do. And this is hard. And I'm not saying, oh, just deal with it. This is how it works. He's saying that he's able to fix on that. And so when opportunity comes, things happen. Here's what he does. He draws back to God and says, okay, this is what God, I don't know all the things, but I know this about God. I don't know what's happening here, but I know this about God. And he emphasizes what he does know about God, and he's faithful. How are you in your trials? Oh, my trials, they're bad. You wouldn't understand, Pastor. I don't understand your trials. And I guarantee you, Joseph wouldn't say to you, oh, you don't get how bad it was for me. You should be just fine because your trial, have you ever been sold into slavery? That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Are you faithful? I've seen people give up on things because a financial decision wasn't made in the church the way they liked it. There was a man, I remember, that had donated a great deal of money for a recovery ministry in our church that wanted it to be done a certain way. And because it wasn't done a certain way, saying, hey, this is the ministry, we're not going to compromise on it, he's done. Not only did he give up on that ministry serving there, he stopped going to church, and he said he gave up on Christianity because of that, because a financial decision wasn't enough to compel a ministry to make some changes on how they were reaching people. A ministry that was leading hundreds of people to Christ. And anyways, with that, it's enough. And listen, we don't know what your trial is, but we do understand your response. It should be faithful, full of faith. With Joseph, we know he was compassionate. He served them. He was confident. He knew who owned the dreams, the understanding of the future. He was still walking with God. He was courageous. He was willing to tell this guy, you're lifted up, and listen, you need to remember me, and you're lifted up is not going to go as well for you, and I guess there's nothing you're going to be able to do to help me after that. But anyways, he didn't waver. He was willing and able to speak of those things because it was true. But what does this mean? Okay, then everything just turns out well because of that. He said those dreams, and the next day they're exalted. Not at all. In chapter number 41 and verse 1, it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. All right, so he interprets these dreams. He tells them, sure enough, what happens is that 3 days later, the baker gets executed, gets hung there, and the birds come and eat him. I mean, it's terrible. But the butler gets removed from prison at this big feast that the Pharaoh is having for all the people that serve him on his birthday. And just so excited, he puts him back up into his prominence and his position, the chief of butlers. Everything is going great, and he forgets all about Joseph. See, Joseph was ungratefully forgotten. So here's what the reminder is, and what I've gotten from this is that in this, when he doesn't get remembered, in fact, it's going to be for 2 years. So 3 days later, he gets back in prominence. 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream, and the butler is like, oh, yeah, I remember this guy helped me out. Joseph, I think. Forgotten. Now, ultimately, here's what we find. We can't trust man. In Psalm 118, verse 8, it says, it is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. This came from a study on confidence and being confident. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. It's an interesting statement, isn't it? It's better to trust the Lord than to put confidence in man. Fair. But let's look at it in more detail, because the next verse pinpoints it even more. It says, it is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in princes. Now, the term princes, a lot of times we think of like spoiled kids of the king. The term prince in the Bible has more so to do with royalty that's in charge of specific things. And so these are specific people. And so what you would say is not just, okay, I'm not going to trust in man, that's fine, but we're not going to trust anybody, even if they have the power to change my circumstances. I'm not going to trust them. Oh, I don't trust people, periodly. We had this discussion in Sunday school. Can I tell you something? I don't trust just about anything. I don't like watching the news. I don't like watching the news at all. I hear stories, and whenever it's a big story, I'm like, all right, I know there's something else behind it. I feel like such a conspiracy theorist for it. You know what's the worst thing about it is I find out I'm right. And so that's the problem with it. Now, the truth is, that's not my realm, honestly. Like when it comes to news, they've never helped me. They've never saved me anything. But when we look at the Bible and realize, yes, he saves. That's what he does, and that helps. Now, I'm not against like catching up on current events and things that are going on. I think it's important for us to know we're praying for our president and praying for our leaders and things like that. It's true. But here's what we find is it's not good to trust man. It's better to trust the Lord. In fact, even in princes, you might say, oh, okay, well, I don't trust people, but you know what? I'm going to trust this. I'm going to trust this prince. That person can help me in this way. It is better in verse number 9, 118 verse 9, it is better to trust the Lord than to put confidence in princes, people that could help you in those specific things. Don't trust in them. Trust in God. Proverbs chapter 3, for the Lord shall be thy confidence. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22, describing Joseph, says, by faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. Joseph was faithful all the way till he died. Literally, the point in which he died, he was still saying, don't bury me in Egypt. I want you to take me and bury me in the promised land. Why? Because he was still confident what God was going to do. It's easier to have confidence in what God has done. For instance, we weren't there when Jesus was crucified, but we know he was. We weren't there when Jesus ascended or resurrected from the dead, but we know he did rise from the dead. We weren't there when he ascended up into heaven, but we know he did, and we have confidence. This is what he did. But boy, the future gets uncertain about a lot of things, doesn't it? I know I'm going to heaven, but what about all the in-between stuff? Jesus is there. I'll go where he's at. But what about all the in-between stuff? What about tomorrow? It's easy to have confidence in the past because we see it in a clearer picture. But tomorrow is more uncertain. When it comes to Joseph, he's faithful even all the way until he dies. God said, all right, this land over there is your land. So he said, I'm going to trust him what he's going to do hundreds of years later. And ultimately, he is faithful. He's unwavering in that faith, even though he's forgotten. When we think about what we're doing here, I think one of the things that happens quite frequently is we become full of faith in many other things. I just think about government. Government becomes our confidence. We're confident that government can take care of our needs and they can fix problems. Can I remind you as Christians, our confidence is not in government. Let me remind you, this is not a popular thing right now in society, but you have to remember as Christians, our confidence is such that we are obedient to him. We ought to be working. We should be working. We're against the idea that government would just continue to pay in unemployment. I'm not against unemployment. That's not my goal. But I'm against the idea that Christians should say, well, you know what, I'm going to get more from unemployment, so I'm just going to keep doing that. People, you should be working. We're not confident in what government can provide. We're going to trust God for it. We're not going to be guided and controlled by fear. We can't be controlled by fear. And we're so moved by fear. What fear, we can do all the things that can happen. All our decisions in life are made because of the fear that we have. Get over the fear, but not just by saying, fine, I'm done with fear. Have more trust in God and confidence in God. Circumstances oftentimes become what controls our life. We're informed only by the news and not by scriptures. We're confident in riches. Notice what Job chapter 31 says about riches. He says, if I have made gold my hope, or have said to find gold, thou art my confidence. If I rejoiced because my wealth was great and because mine hand had gotten much. Verse 28 says, this also were an iniquity to be punished by the judge. So then I deserve punishment for it. For I should have denied the God that is above. So in other words, if I put my confidence in finances or anything, then what I did was I was, in effect, denying God. Because I was trusting something else. Have faith in God. What are we struggling with now in our faith for God? I love the way that the service has been tailored, put together, not because I organized and orchestrate all those things. I didn't even know what Ms. Jewel was going to sing today. And man, just the way the pieces put together. Lord's providence is perfect and that he's given us what we need. So let me encourage you to be unwavering in your faith in all things. I know that the message today is for many people, myself included. But I would hope that we would take this as a reminder. Trust God. Trust God. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for what you've given us here. I'm thankful for Joseph. God, I look at his life, Lord, and I couldn't imagine. Lord, I know that in what he went through, Lord, there's no question there was years of difficulty. Lord, I know that he's in prison for a long time. To think that he had a hope of being out of prison for a couple of years until it was the right time, Lord, but it was the timing that was hard. No doubt those 2 years were hard. I'm praying, Lord, as we go through difficulties and trials and heartaches and disappointments and battles and those things in which we are going through on this side of glory, that we would have our confidence in you. Lord, I'm praying that you would help us. Lord, I believe that you've led in these things, and I'm thankful that we can trust you not just to interpret dreams, Lord, but we can trust you to accomplish in our lives those things that need to be done. Lord, we know you're faithful. You have saved us. You will accomplish that work in us. And I'm praying, Lord, that we would be able to